It's an early battle for supremacy in the East as Roanoke will take on Morgantown. This is your RCFFL Week 2 previews. So Roanoke and Morgantown out of the box with wins in Week 1. The Rebels were the league's highest scoring team in Week 1. They put up a quartet of 150-plus players led by quarterback Matt Ryan at 236. They defeated the Mantis by almost 400 points. That was the week's largest margin of victory. The Moose went 850-plus and knocked off Longwood thanks to a 200-plus effort from A.J. Green. Now, this was despite a 0 from kicker Kai Forbath, so they were fortunate to get that win. Wide receiver Steve Smith was on the bench for the Moose with a 198 score last week, but despite that big game, Coach Romaine is not yet putting him in the starting lineup. I guess he's waiting to see if he can duplicate that in Week 2. Now, the Rebels were victorious in the regular season against the Moose last year. The Moose collected a win, however, against the Rebels in the first round of the playoffs, knocking Roanoke out. So they, I'm sure, are looking to get a little payback in this one. Both teams struggle to score in this series. In fact, they've combined to score in excess of 800 plus. Only 14 out of the last 36 attempts for these two teams combined, so they struggle to score points when they face one another. The Moose have also won 5 of the last 6 in the series, so this one could be a tough one for the Rebels to come up with. Again, last season, Roanoke, 763 to 674 win in the regular season, but it was Morgantown, 717 to 661 in the playoffs. Lifetime, the Moose hold the edge in this one at 12-9. Next game on the docket is Jericho versus Milwaukee. Again, a pair of 1-0 teams. The defending champion Niners and the Buddhas both found success in Week 1, but they found it in different ways. The Niners almost put up 1,000 points as they dispatched the Stanimals 970 to 851. The Buddhas got their win, but they struggled to score points. They still got the victory against the Zebras, but the Zebras were pitiful in Week 1, so the Buddhas got a 710 to 587 win. You don't normally see a win when you only score 710 points. Now, the Niners got 340 on defense despite getting a 0 from Jonathan Cyprian, so that's a good sign for them. The offense was led by kicker Matt Bryant and wide receiver Jeremy Macklin, both of which had 175 plus. Milwaukee had a pair of 100 plus efforts in Roddy White and Paul Poslesny, but Bishop Sankey and especially wide receiver Demarius Thomas were disappointing in Week 1. Their bench actually had their best performances with Noshawn Moreno and DeAndre Hopkins each going over 150, but only Moreno is expected to start here in Week 2. Surprisingly enough, Milwaukee is a slight favorite in this one against the Niners, as the Niners' defense is projected to take a step back. I don't know. We'll see about that. Jonathan Cyprian, though, is out this week, so the Niners do need to find a replacement for him to play this week. The Niners have dominated the series, winning 2 out of every 3 games in this series, and they're the first team in league history to record 20 wins against any other opponent, and that is here against the Buddhas. Last year included a pair of wins by Jericho that culminated in a first-round playoff win, so the Buddhas are really on the short end of the stick, and I'm sure they want some payback in this one. Jericho, though, has combined to score 2,547 points in their last 2 games against Milwaukee, so Milwaukee better bring it if they want to win this one. Jericho embarrassed the Buddhas last year in the regular season, 1444 to 490, almost a 1,000-point win. And then again in the playoffs, Jericho went 1,100 plus at 1105 to 792 to knock the Buddhas out of the playoffs. Lifetime, it's the Niners 20-10 over the Buddhas. Next game up, the Dragons at 1-0 against the Guinness Gang Tacklers, who are 0-1. Now, the Dragons opened up the 2014 season with a convincing 936 to 592 smackdown of the Dukes. Now they turn their attention to the Tacklers. The Tacklers posted 800 plus last week, but they lost a close one to the Colonels, 876 to 815. As usual, the Dragons got a big defensive effort as their defenders combined for 415 points in Week 1. Toss in 166 from Nick Foles, and Monongahela rolled to victory easily. The Tacklers actually could have won their game last week, but their lineup decisions cost them. A pair of 100-plus efforts on the bench in Darren Sproles and Marcus Colston could have made the difference had they started. Now, the tacklers are going to be without their first-round pick, running back Adrian Peterson, who decided it would be a good idea to crack his 4-year-old son with a tree branch. So a win here is going to be pretty impressive despite not having this moron Adrian Peterson to play for them this week. Despite that loss, though, the experts for some reason have the tacklers as a slight favorite. They don't think the Dragons' defense can duplicate that Week 1 success. So that could be a key to watch here. If the tacklers are to win this week, they're going to need to break a 4-game losing streak to the Dragons. And to do that, they're going to have to put up some big points because the Dragons average 933 points per game lifetime against Guinness. Last year, it was the Dragons in an 801-761 victory, and lifetime it is Monongahela at 6-2 over Guinness. That brings us to 1-0 Kearney against 1-0 Walla Walla, another battle of undefeateds. The Colonels won a close one in the first week of the season as they edged out the Tacklers 876 to 815. They'll take on the Wallabies in week 2 after Walla Walla easily dispatched the Seahorses 866 to 696. The linchpin of the Colonels' win was a brilliant performance from wide receiver Calvin Johnson. He put up 284 and proved he is still the best wide receiver in the league. Their defensive effort was a little bit lackluster considering it was a Kearney defense, which is usually very good, so that'll be something to watch going forward. The Wallabies got 200 plus from Le'Veon Bell, who's looking like a very good running back. Colin Kaepernick was 100 plus as well, but the rest of the offense was very disappointing. Doug Martin, Des Bryant, and Victor Cruz combined didn't even get to 100 points. Luckily for them, their defense was excellent. They put up 365 last week, and they got the victory. Now, odds makers have this one leaning in favor of the Wallabies. They're expecting an offensive explosion from them. However, this matchup has historically tilted heavily towards Kearney. Walla Walla has just a single victory over Kearney lifetime, and only once has Walla Walla exceeded 750 points against them. Meanwhile, the Colonels average 900 points a game against the Wallabies, and only once have they failed to score at least 850. So this is going to be a tricky win if Walla Walla is going to pull it off. Last season, it was Kearney with the win, 773 to 708. Lifetime, it's Kearney 4-1 over Walla Walla. All right, next up, Biscayne and Longwood. Both teams took it on the chin in week 1. Somebody's going to get themselves back to 500. The other team is going to be at 0-2 and a little bit behind the 8 ball early here in the season. Biscayne was run off the field last week. They met the defending champion Niners, and they just could not compete. Longwood kept things close, but they couldn't get over the hump against a solid Morgantown squad. Matthew Stafford led Biscayne with 221. Matt Forte was solid with 125, but their defense tallied only 190 points, and Larry Fitzgerald continues to be an underwhelming wide receiver in the league. With a perfect lineup, the Head Knockers could have won this one. They could be 1-0 headed into this, but they left running back Chris Ivory's 172 points on the bench, and that cost them the ball game. They did have 4 players go over 100 points last week, led by Drew Brees and Charles Woodson, but no one cleared 115, so they didn't have anything spectacular out of a player, and a lot of times that's what it takes to win a game. The experts suggest to look for a bounce back from Biscayne this week and a disappointing week from Longwood. Despite that prognosis, though, the Head Knockers are looking to make it 2 straight over the Stanimals as they defeated them last year 893 to 837 and lead the all-time series 1-0. Next up is Manhattan and Durham. Again, 2 teams at 0-1. The Mantis, they ran into a buzzsaw in week 1. They were demolished 11-23 to 749 by the Rebels. This week they're going to take on the Dukes, and the Dukes are coming off of a stinging loss of their own. They lost to the Dragons 936 to 592. Which one of these squads is going to turn it around in week 2, and which one is going to suffer from the hangover of a Matic thumping? That's the question we're going to find out. The Manhattan running attack posted a woeful 83 points in week 1. But the good news for them is they had a pair of 100-plus running backs on the bench, so there's hope that they can turn that running game around. Peyton Manning put up 149. The defense tallied 300, so this team's got the talent. They just got to get the right people on the field. For the Dukes, things are a little bit more bleak. All of their players, starters and bench, with the exception of Carlos Dansby, were under 100 points last week. Tony Romo and Jamal Charles were huge disappointments. Ben Tate is hurt. He's out this week. Defensive back James Ahedebo scored a big fat 0 last week, so they've got a lot of problems to deal with. Now, despite all that, though, the favorite in this one, according to projections, is Durham. They're expecting Romo and Charles to redeem themselves in week 2, and they're expecting the Mantis offense to struggle. Durham has had won 5 out of 6 in this series from 2006 to 2011, but the Mantis have won the last 2. Manhattan is looking to make it 3 straight over the Dukes for the first time in series history if they can get a win here in week 2. Last season it was Manhattan, 8-10 to 7-12, but the Dukes still lead the series at 8-6. And that'll bring us to the last game of the week. This is 0-1 Kaloa versus 0-1 Zimbabwe. Both teams in this matchup failed to reach 700 points last week. Scores in that range are going to give you a 3-10 season, so these two teams have got a lot of work to do. The Seahorses were dropped by the Walla Walla Wallabies, 866 to 696, while the Zebras were the league's worst scoring team in week 1, falling to the Buddhas, 710 to 587. With a better starting lineup, the Seahorses could have kept it close, within 8 points, but they couldn't have won last week. Andrew Luck was great at 177. Julio Jones was over 100 points, but the defense was miserable. They combined for just 180 points on the week. Now, rookie wide receiver Kelvin Benjamin had a big game from the bench, and it looks like he's going to earn the start for Coach McKinney's team instead of veteran Michael Crabtree. The Zebras didn't have a single player, starter or bench, exceed 95 points. And with just 190 from their defense, they had little chance to succeed. The projected matchup is almost dead even, so look for the team with the better defense to prevail in this one. The Zebras lead in the overall series, but the Seahorses have been victorious in the last 3 games. A win this week for the Seahorses will mark the longest winning streak in the series for them. Last season it was Kaloa, 758 to 643, but lifetime this series goes 14-12-1 to the Zebras. Good luck to everybody out there this week, and we'll talk to you next week.